It's time to install the interior doors and trim. Hi, I'm Joy Watts with Watts Homes and Construction, and I'm at the job site again with Troy Brocklebank and Brad Burdick, the trim carpenters that you saw in a previous episode, and they will be installing all the interior doors as well as the base and the casing around the windows and doors. So let's take a look.
This is what the trim looks like before it is installed. It is MDF and comes pre-primed from our supplier, Builder's First Source. Here you can see Troy installing a piece of base in a closet. He has placed shims under the base to make sure it is installed at the correct height and uses his tape measure to find the studs to nail it in place. This is the living room where they are installing AZAC instead of MDF base due to the height requirement needed in that area. You can see how the board is installed from the floor to just under the window. The guys have already cut the electrical outlet holes in the baseboard before it is installed to the wall. Now you see them nailing the board in place at the top of the base to secure it. When Troy gets to a vertical stud, he will use multiple nails to help secure it before he goes back later to add additional nails throughout the board. With such a large piece of base, the carpenters have to adjust the board periodically to make sure it is in the correct location before nailing it in place. Instead of installing standard trim around the windows in the living room, they are installing AZAC to fill the space between the windows. Standard wood casing does not come in the length needed for the trim to be installed from the baseboard to the top of the highest window, which is another reason why they used AZAC. Lastly, AZAC is flexible where MDF trim is not. You can see the guys lifting the board in place and making sure it fits properly in the space. Small adjustments need to be made at the top and bottom of the board to get it into position. Once in place, Brad can install a few nails on the top to secure it before he works his way down the board. Now you can see just how long the board is. The guys are now working in the office where they will be installing the window trim. They start with the vertical window jamb pieces. Brad uses his tape measure to make sure he will be installing the shims in the correct location and marks the wall where he wants them to go. Troy is confirming the top window jamb is the correct length, which it is not, so they mark where he needs to cut the board. Next, you see Brad installing the shims, which keeps the board straight. He confirms this by using his tape measure to check distances on how much of the window frame is exposed. When the board is lined up, he will nail it where he installed the shim pieces to keep it in place. After the shim is secured, he cuts off the excess piece of shim. Then he moves on to the next location to install a shim and confirms it is ready to be nailed in place. Once the side window jambs are in place, they move on to the top jamb. Brad uses the drywall screws above the window as a guide on where to nail the trim piece in place. The window sill board is the last one to be installed for the window jambs. Again, Brad uses the drywall screws as a reference on where to nail the board. These are the office windows and what they look like after the window jambs are installed, in addition to the casing around the outside of the windows. When installing the casing, they cut the corners at a 45-degree angle to finish the look. Now that the windows are trimmed, it is time to install the interior doors. This is the style of door the homeowners have selected. The door opening has to be prepped before the door and the jamb can be installed. Here you see Brad installing the door shims in multiple locations, similar to what he did with the windows. Now that the shims are in place, Troy lifts the door and frame into position so they can start the installation process. The frame has to be tight and centered against the opening. You see how they make a few adjustments before Brad nails it in place. Brad starts nailing around the door hinge at the top of the door and continues to align it as it is nailed in place. The door is nailed on the hinge side, so now he has to shim up the jamb on the other side of the door. You can see the pencil marks on the drywall to the left of the door, and these marks are where the shims will be installed. Then he closes the door to make sure it lines up. Since the door does not close tight, it tells him that more shims need to be installed, which is what he's doing now. Sometimes more than one shim needs to be installed at a particular location in order to make the necessary adjustments to the frame. After all the shims are installed in the door jamb, he cuts off the exposed shims. Now that the shims are installed, he nails the door at the top and then moves his way down the door, securing it in place. This is what the door looks like after it is installed, and the door is finished with MDF casing to complete the look.
All of the trim and doors are now installed. Thanks for watching. Make sure to check out our website and subscribe to our YouTube channel. See you next episode.